just skipped ahead a couple hours. I just got back from work. My boy Fire Z is behind the camera right now, helping me out. Come over to this side. We have the cylinder head getting all prepped up right here. This is the surface that will meet against the head gasket that then meets against the actual block itself. What I like to do for degreasing the cylinder head as well as the block itself before putting the head gasket and the head onto it is hitting it down with some brake cleaner and using a lint-free cloth to wipe it all down. That way you have no grease. From this point on, you want to make sure that you don't put any fingerprints or anything on the surface itself, because even a little bit of grease that you have on your fingers can affect the sealing of the head gaskets. Since we are using ARP head studs, we've got our head studs right here. We are going to be putting some 30 weight oil on here, the part that goes onto the block, and then we're going to hand thread them in, make sure that they are tight by hand. We aren't using a ratchet to tighten them down or anything. That's how ARP wants us to do it. And then afterwards, I'll show you the dowel pins and how exactly we're putting those on. Hey. So we just dipped in the threads to the 30 weight motor oil, only the best, full synthetic, just kidding, SuperTech. And we're just going to hand thread this in. And I'm just going to do this one all the way for demonstration purposes. Get this all the way in by hand. If you look up top, there is availability to put in an Allen head on it. And if you want, you can put the little key just to kind of finish it in by hand, but you don't want to put the ratchet with the socket that's an Allen head because you don't want to overdo this. But it's okay to put the little wrench in there. And is that what it's called, the little Allen wrench? Mm-hmm. And little tiny 1 or 2 inch thing just to make sure that it's all the way down. But you don't want to tighten this a lot. That's a big key. So we're just going to throw the rest of them in and then show you from there. Okay, so we've got all of the studs actually onto the block right now. I just want to show you something real quick. As you can see, we've got the rotating assembly inside, all the pistons. And if you come over here, I've got the bolt onto the oil pump, well, the crankshaft technically. So these motors spin counterclockwise. So we're going to spin the motor until it's on the upward stroke for cylinder 1 and 2. And that's just a demonstration. But for when we put the cylinder head on, I want to have all 4 pistons basically equal on a center, dead center, I guess it's called. It's not up and it's not down, but we want to have this centered. That way when we set the cylinder head on and we're messing with the cams, just in case if you turn it or you put the cam cap on wrong and one of the valves accidentally open, you're not forcing that valve directly into a piston. Once you have your cylinder head already 100% top dead center and the correct valves corresponding to be open, then I continue the counterclockwise rotation and bring 1 and 4 up to top dead center, and then I set my timing. I just wanted to do a visual representation for you on that. We always set it right there, and that's just how I personally like to do my timing. Other people will tell you there's other better ways to do it, so form your own opinion. Like I said in other videos, this is basically just telling you how I do my personal way. So with that being said, we're going to give a final wipe down to the surface of the block, and we're going to do a final wipe down to the surface of the head. Then I'm going to lay my head gasket down. Okay, so here we have our Golden Eagle Manufacturing Advanced Seal Head Gasket, which is one that I run on my particular build. I know a lot of people use the JE Pro Seal, or a lot of people run OEM head gaskets. Not knocking either of those decisions. This is just what I personally want to run. Like I was saying, there isn't any problem with running those companies. Please don't roast me in the comments for this. I don't have any more gloves. I don't want to run to the store real quick. My hands are cleaned and degreased at the moment. And another good way to pick up a head gasket is from inside of the bore. Put your fingers out and only contact this portion like that. We're going to place the head gasket onto the block right now. You want to make sure that the lettering is up for the Golden Eagle Manufacturing head gasket, and then other gaskets will specify up, down, or some. It's kind of easy to tell. Let's bring it over this side. And each one has a correct way to place it, not only up and down, but front and back. This is how this one goes. and this is the specific gasket to run for LSVtec. In this case, we have the LS block with the GSR head, and you can use this for any combination, B16, GSR, Type R, any type of VTEC head. Okay, we've got the head gasket laid down. Now for LSVtec, there's different ways to do it. You can drill out the head, you can drill out the block. Other people do some shady stuff. I have the Golden Eagle step down dowel pins. So essentially what this does, it allows you to run the GSR head or VTEC head with a non-VTEC block and run a dowel size correct for the head, dowel size correct for the block. You want to put these into the block now. And if I'm not mistaken, the smaller goes into the LS block. Then the bigger, let me just demonstrate right here, goes on the exhaust side, the two outer ones. The bigger fits perfectly into the dowel pin location for that. So we're gonna place it into the block on the other side as well. So that is ready to accept the head. Next thing we're gonna do, make sure that the surface on here is 100% degreased, wiped down, and ready to go. We're gonna drop it on. We wanna make sure that we have everything ready to go. I have the 10 corresponding ARP head bolt or head nut washers, as well as 10 of the corresponding nuts. And for the ARP, they have different types of lubes that you can use for tightening down everything, because with different friction lubes, there's different torque specs. So I'm not gonna tell you exactly what I use because I want you to form your own opinion. When you buy the ARP hardware, they will tell you exactly how they want you to do it, and you can look up online exactly how other people do it. Okay, now like I said, we have everything all set and ready. I'm gonna use my extreme strength of the Hulk to lift this up. Hernia! We are going to set this down. Make sure all your dowel pins set in correctly, which I'm about to do. And there we go. Dowel pin is in. That is in. Now we are going to get our needle nose pliers, because I find this works best. Open it around the washer and drop it in. And repeat that for all of the studs, just so you know you have them all in to begin with.
So just to be clear, because I'm not getting it really good on video, you're opening the needle nose inside of
the washer.
Right?
Yes. Just like that. And then dropping them over the stud. This makes it a lot easier than trying to drop it with your hands or with a magnet or something. Gonna set the actual nuts on there now. Nuts in right now. I put them on a little magnet tool, and then I thread them on just to start off with, just so I don't drop them in, basically. Why are you laughing so much, bro?
I'm just curious, why is that funny?
Because you're looking at me and you're laughing whenever I say nuts.
Why is that a funny thing?
You know what? This is an instructional video. I need your
I'm sorry.
Negativity.
No, that comes from the comments.
And then if you said it comes from the comments. I know y'all be hating on my videos. I see you steady like 4 or 5 subscribers. Like 10 minutes after I upload any video, y'all be thumbing me down. Thanks, guys. It's just motivation to keep on going.
Just a question.
Ask away. A little trick.
Why don't you just put a magnet inside of the socket?
Why don't you just mind your business? Another trick you can do is put some napkin inside of the socket, and then the nut stays in there, basically. It's an old little trick that I do for hard to reach places.
What happens if the napkin gets lost?
Then you, you just send it, bro. You just, hold on. Send it, papi. Now we have all of the studs with corresponding washers and nuts threaded on to the first few threads. And whenever you torque, like I've explained in other parts of the series, other parts of YouTube videos, I've always explained we want to do things in sequence. So the sequence for this is normally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I'll put a little picture of the sequence for you. We want to do in torque increments of about 25 to 30, which is what I personally do. But for the first initial sequence, I just bring them down by the impact, like you guys have seen in other videos. And like I've explained, if you're not comfortable not doing a lot of torque pressure with an impact, do not do this method, just do it by a ratchet. But I do feel comfortable with it. So what I'm doing about right now, barely bringing it down, should be to about, I'd say anywhere from 10 to 15 foot-pounds. And now we are going to start doing the torquing process with the actual torque wrench. So like I said, we are doing the torque sequence. I have my torque wrench calibrated to 25 foot-pounds. Like I was saying, everybody has their own specific values that they want to go by. I'm doing it to 25 to start off with. I'm just gonna get all of these down. I guess it was a lot looser than I thought off of the impact gun. And you're gonna go in the sequence and tighten it down. I'm just gonna make sure that we don't use the torque wrench unnecessarily. So the less clicks you put on it, the better, because you're putting less life out of the torque wrench. So I just got the last click on this sequence particularly. Now I'm going to take my torque wrench back down to 0. And if you're wondering why I'm not going to the next step, it's not as important right now since we only did it to 25, but the higher your torque spec is, the more heat and friction that is created within the bolt or the stud and the nut. So right now what we're gonna let it do is cool down for a couple minutes. Since it's the first sequence, I like to do 5 to 10 minutes to make sure that the bolt is not stretching or compressing or anything because of the heat, and then we'll do the next torque sequence. For the final torque, I like to wait about half an hour to an hour just to ensure that the torque spec is 100% cooled down, the bolt is 100% cooled down, and our torque spec is accurate and not distorted because of the heat. While we're waiting for the bolts to cool down, I wanted to go over something. Right in the center, we have the VTech dowel pin as well as O-ring that a lot of people overlook. So a lot of people overlook this in engine builds or in any type of engine, even if it's just a stock rebuild. You would be super surprised about the amount of engines that are B-Series VTECs that I take apart and do not have this part. It's basically a little dowel pin and a little O-ring. The little O-ring sits right here, dowel pin sits right there. It not only ensures the perfect alignment of the cam cap for the center, but it also regulates, if I'm not mistaken, the oil that's used for the VTEC and keeps good oil pressure. It can run without it. Sometimes your VTEC will work, sometimes it won't. But the point isn't that it can run without it. It needs to be there. So if you don't have these by chance, they're like $3 or $4 a piece at Honda. This is the part number for the O-ring, 91302GO or GE0000. And then the dowel pin is this number right here, 94301-08100. Like I said, they're pretty cheap to buy. Honda normally has to order them. They take like a day or two to get there, but it's a very essential component to your build on the cylinder head, so it's something definitely not to overlook. It's been a few minutes now. We're gonna go for sequence number 2. We went from 25, which was the first sequence, to 50 now. Something I wanna mention is about your style of torquing things. If you notice, when you torque something, you want the final torque to be achieved while you're still in motion. Reason being, there's a lot of articles out there about braking torque and actual torque. The theory behind it, some people have different mixed feelings about it, so that's why I'm saying theory. The theory behind it is that your braking torque is gonna be higher than your torquing torque. I guess, I'm not sure if I'm wording it correctly, but if I'm torquing it, for example, to 25 foot-pounds, and I stop at 24, and then I go to continue, or to start torquing it again, it'll need about 26 foot-pounds to begin torquing it again, to get the bolt to move, to get the nut to move. And if I am trying to achieve 25, and it needs 26 to break loose, then I'm overstepping 25. and I'm not precisely torquing the specific nut or bolt. There's a whole article that I was reading on it, but basically the end of the story, you want to achieve your torque while in motion, like right there. So you want to start with a good amount of availability to move. You don't want to start your torquing right here and then have to stop halfway and then continue going this way, because you want to make sure that it's all in one motion. So we just went from 50, we are going to do 70 foot-pounds now, which is the second to last torque that I'm going to spec it to. The second to last spec that I'm going to torque it to. Final is going to be 85 for this particular setup. So I know it's only 15 for the last increment, but it's, and I'm doing what I said not to do. I stopped halfway down that, but I'm gonna start torquing it to 70. And then I'll be back for the final torque. Let it rest for a bit now, and we're gonna do the final torque now. Leave me alone.
I thought you said lint-free towels.
Yeah, I did. I also say a lot. Do as I say, not as I do. Okay.
SB tuning exposed, Poppy.
Go ahead.
Oh, we already were.
Okay, so now that we have the cylinder head completely torqued on, we're gonna get our assembly lube and put this all over the rockers generously. Same thing for the other side. Now we're gonna place our cams. Good way to remember, the intake cam is what supports the distributor. So the one with the notches is always gonna be your intake for this particular motor. And we have right up here indicators for top dead center. You have these adjustments right up top, and this is an aftermarket cam gear, so it's gonna be different for OEM cams or different companies. Everything's gonna be specific to their own, but for this specific, you have your adjustments right up top, and then these lines to indicate the straightness for top dead center. Now, lining it up, it doesn't have to be 100% in top dead center, it just has to be very close. And I'll tell you why in just a minute. We're setting that one in right here. You wanna make sure your cam seals are straight. Why'd you stop recording? I'm just kidding. Okay, so come over here. You can see that we have the front of the engine cam seals in place. Okay. Now we're gonna get this as close to top dead center as we can. And now I'm gonna get all the cam caps and start placing them over top of this. Before we do so, we're gonna get some more assembly lube and put this over top of the cam. We just wanna make sure that on the first startup and when we're rotating the motor before the first startup, that there is no metal on metal and we are friction free. So right now I'm just cleaning up a little bit of brake clean, the cam cap that goes over the exhaust side, which will seal a cam plug on this side. I try to always run aftermarket cam seals or OEM. This is a really cheap aftermarket one. That's the only thing I have access to right now. So to prevent this from going bad, we are going to do what you shouldn't really have to do with the cam seal or cam plug, but we're gonna run a bead of RTV around it. And reason being, this is very weak material. We don't want any chances of it leaking. And I will probably end up just getting a different seal before we get the engine running, but I just wanna make sure that for the video's sake, I can show you how to do it this way if you have to. I'm just gonna put this out, and I think my RTV is broken, but put a nice bead all around it. You already know you're not supposed to touch the RTV, so I'm gonna do my best not to. This is probably way too much. So we got about this much all around. With the glove to not have any grease, just gonna set that right there. And set this over top. And we are going to be doing all the cam caps right now, so just for the time being, I'll set the bolts in, and I'm not threading it in all the way, but I just want it to be ready to get there when we do it. So this is the cam cap assembly. These large 3 pieces are going to go on first. They all have dowel pins, so you want to make sure that you align everything correctly. You have plenty of lube in there. And these come over this side. You can see right here there's little indicators. 2, then 3 is obviously next. This is actually on the wrong part. Right there, 2, 3, and then 4. And this is how you align it. And this is gonna go on with the cam rails on top. But before that, like we mentioned, what a lot of people forget is to put the O-ring and the dowel pin right there. So here's that O-ring and dowel pin. I'm gonna set the dowel pin in first. Right down the center, little O-ring around it. There's nothing special about this. You just wanna make sure that it's in there. Then we get that cap. You know, press that on basically. And the cams aren't gonna have to be in total top dead center. They like to move off to the side, which makes it a little bit easier, but it's a good thing that we have the pistons all the way down. So it's a good little allowment for play, I guess you could say. Then we're getting our other cap right here. And this goes right there. Our 2 caps for this side right here. So now we're going to place these caps right over here. And once we know that all the dowels are basically aligned and ready to go, so now we're gonna put the cam rails on. You wanna make sure that you have the ones that accept the 10mm bolts on the cam gear side. I'm gonna set this one right here. And you have all but 2 of the same 12mm bolts, which is gonna have the ability to go through the valve cover and be able to hold your spark plug cover down. So if you come over here, we'll take the camera. You have the center 4, these 4 right here. That is where it has to be. And then you have the 10mm right here on the cam gear side. So we're gonna get all these threaded by finger first, make sure that everything goes in smoothly, and then we are going to start tightening it down with the ratchet. Okay, so now we've got everything finger tight. Now we're gonna go with the ratchet and put it to the torque spec. Like I mentioned in the last videos, torque wrench specifications for this low, I normally do it by feel. You can choose to do what you like for this, but I do it by feel. I'll link down I'll put a little thumbnail for the torque spec for this specifically. And the sequence that I'm gonna be doing is straight down the center, then do one side, then do the other side, this side, then this side, and then the small 10mm bolts and the small 10mm bolts. Just like with anything else, we're doing a sequence to evenly apply the pressure all throughout. Okay, now that we have everything up top torqued, we are going to move on to the timing of the actual motor. What I like to do is a long screwdriver, place it on cylinder 1 to be able to know when I am going to top dead center, not only judging by the oil pump gear. So first things first, I'm going to get the cams aligned to top dead center. Cam bolts are 14mm, and we're just gonna bring these to align with each other. What you wanna do, these 2 lines right here need to be perfectly in alignment straight, and then the degree portion of the cam gear, that's a better angle right there, this needs to be pointing straight up, so that's how you know that you're on the top dead center portion. I'll just set this down real quick. I'm gonna move that a bit. We want to get this to as close as possible. And when you're putting the timing belt on, sometimes you have to move it a tooth off or close to a tooth off first, just so you can align it with the belt and get the slack correct and everything. It helps to have the motor as straight as possible on the stand. That way you can ensure everything is straight. Now that we have the motor itself, well, the top half of the motor, the cams in top dead center, we are going to move the oil pump and the crankshaft to the top dead center. If you look right here, there's a little slash that indicates when it hits top dead center, and that marks up with the arrow that's right on the oil pump right there. And that's one quick way of knowing, and then the other way is knowing with the screwdriver up top. Since the nature of the engine is to turn counterclockwise, we are turning counterclockwise now. If you can see up here, the screwdriver is coming up, so you know that the piston is on its way up. We're gonna bring it to the top dead center of the bottom and ensure that it's still the top dead center of the top. And that's right about there. We verified that with the screwdriver right up top. That's the highest point. There's a few different ways to get the timing belt. What I find the best is to get it around the oil pump, then around the tensioner and the water pump. Then you come up this way. You want to get the belt itself over the exhaust cam first, just barely, and then slip it over the intake. Then you bring it on, and the motor has a lot of slack on the water pump side, which we will correct in just a second. But basically you have the engine and timing right there. So I just put it on with the spring onto the tensioner. So it just eliminated all the slack, or most of it, on the timing belt side for the water pump. We have a little bit of slack up front, a little bit of slack in the back side of the engine. So now we're going to tighten the water pump tensioner, which is a 14 millimeter. And we don't want to get it super tight because we're going to be loosening it in just a minute. But you want to get this about that tight. Not too much, just enough to keep it without moving. Then you want to go ensure that you're on top dead center again. Make sure all your marks line up and you have the crank pushing the piston as high as it goes. Then you want to turn the crankshaft 3 teeth on, well, using the turn of the crankshaft, you want to turn the cam gears 3 teeth. So a little bit more, right about there. The whole stand's moving right now. Okay. Right about there. You have all of the slack taken off of the front, just slack put on the back. You want to then loosen the tensioner again. And you can't see much on the camera, but it eats a little bit of the slack on the back. And then you can retighten the tensioner. And you see we still have a little bit of slack because the spring isn't super strong from the factory. So what some people do, what I like to do, is just get something on the bottom of the tensioner. I'm not going to be using this, but basically you just want to pull this up and then tighten the bolt for the tensioner and get a little bit extra tension on there. Now, if you're running an LSVtec, your timing is always going to be a little bit off from what Honda wants it to be, because obviously you're running a cylinder head and a block that are not meant to go together from the factory. So if it's off by, if you want to say 1/8 of a tooth type thing, don't be alarmed. That's how some of us run. But there are the fixes to it, like I was saying in, I think, the earlier of this video, engine to green. On my particular setup, since both the block and the head have been cut, I also run an aftermarket tensioner up front, which I didn't include in the install of this timing belt because that's what 9 times out of 10 people are not going to be doing. But just to let you know, this motor is degreed. I'm going to take pictures of everything and also talk to the engine builder who helped me degree this motor to ensure that everything is how it should be. So please don't worry about that. Basically, once you have your timing set over here, the next thing to do would be put the timing cover on, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's just a couple bolts. And for the cylinder head, it's pretty much done. I just wanted to also mention something else about the cylinder head that I don't think I touched on earlier. For distributor, I am running an AIP, I believe is the company. They have aftermarket distributors, really great spark. I personally haven't had an issue with them. 629 horsepower with no spark issue whatsoever on the dyno. My buddy's running 610, I want to say, on his single cam on boost. He's not having an issue at all with them either. A lot of people run them up to 700 or 800 horsepower. And I'm actually in between keeping that distributor right now or upgrading to coil on plug setup. So if you guys want to let me know what you think in the comments down below. Obviously, I know that coil on plug is much better and it is a little bit more costly, but when you're building these motors, as my friend over here says, there is no real budget when it comes to race cars. So let me know what you think. You're not even gonna smile or wait for the video. There you go. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Like always, we really appreciate you guys checking out the videos. If there's something that I didn't touch and you want me to go over in the comments or in the next video, just let me know. I'd be happy to touch over it. And like always, stay tuned and enjoy the rest of your day.
So you said your outro, but the valve cover's still not on, bro.
To install your valve cover, grab valve cover. Valve cover installed. I'll go over the valve cover real quick. The valve cover is very simple. You have nuts that sit over top of grommets right here. For the seal on the valve cover, I personally like to run 4 dabs of RTV. One right here, another right here, one right there, another right here, right there, right there, right here, and right there, which is basically the 4 corners. That's gonna be like the sharp edges for where the valve cover gasket won't be able to seal as well. Right here you can see I still have the grommets for the spark plugs seal. They're still on there. A lot of people will probably bash me for this as well. But what we do is put a little bit of RTV within the bottom of the grommets to let this seal a little bit better. And we never have any issues with it personally. I actually just keep this on when I take the valve cover on and there's no issue whatsoever. But, you know, you form your own opinion about that. But basically, the valve cover, just put it in those 4 corners. I don't have the gasket tonight, so I'm not going to be doing that in the video. But you make sure that there's no grease or anything on either the cylinder head, where we're putting the RTV, or on the valve cover. And you're going to be using brake clean to clean that up. And just set it over top. Tighten everything down by hand first. I like doing the inners right here, then the outers. And after about 2 minutes of letting it rest with the fresh RTV there, I do the final torque on it. Happy now, bro? All right, that's a wrap. Enjoy your night, guys.
Hi, little puppies.